to come to the corner, our corner, as Susan just mentioned, became a space where young people from all over the communities started standing and supporting the Black Lives Matter movement. At one point, we had over 250 young people coming to the corner back in the wintertime in March and April. And it's really sustained itself over the year, these past several months. And we've had a really interesting time with all of the new people coming. Of course, with the we're focusing on perpetual war also. And one of the things that we do try to do with the young people and with the new people coming is we try to take the time and let them know about other types of issues. For instance, in August, we had a Hiroshima Nagasaki commemoration. Last week, we did an Armistice Day at the corner with the young people, just to give them a sense of history. So we felt that this was a really important thing for them to know. In fact, one of the young people have come up to us and said, we've learned more about history being here on the corner than we've ever learned in a history class in high school. So we're really grateful for that opportunity. And to have that interaction has been a really incredible experience.
Thank you. I just realized I just started recording. I hadn't hit the record button, so excuse me. But I also tapped into Facebook Live, so if anybody's on, they'll get on that way. All right, so let me come back to, I want to pull up my next slide because I think and I think you'll appreciate this. And I have Jen Brady in mind in asking you that. But, one of the things I see is mentorship. In varying degrees, like I see it in politics, the Democratic Party has struggled to accommodate itself to new voices and new energy. That doesn't, you don't merely welcome newcomers. I think you mentor them, but you're probably too humble to see it that way. Talk about how you've supported other groups and leaders. Can you mention some specific people and some specific groups? So not only have you welcomed people, you mentored them, and I really do believe that. So can you talk about some specific groups that you've worked with that are newer, and just describe the relationship between you?
Well, I have a list here. There are so many. Actually, Jen Brady, People Power Patchogue. I'm looking across the all here from different organizations. We've gone with Women in Black, Code Pink. Long Island, the Green Party of Suffolk County, Pax Christi, Peace Action New York State, Unitarian Universalist Congregation at both Stony Brook and Shelter Island, the Suffolk Peace Network, Veterans for Peace Long Island, Long Island Rising when we supported them for their Women's March. So many different types of groups that we have gotten to know. And of course, our sister organization on the South Shore, South Country Peace Group, who we were just with on Wednesday with the Armistice Day on Main Street in Patchogue. Bill was there, Susan was there. Members of the North and South Country Peace Group were there in front of the recruiting station. So it's a long history of working with other groups.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say that when you mentioned the Democratic Party, I wanted to say that North Country Peace Group has never formally endorsed candidates, and that we're not affiliated with any political party. And I think I was trying to think of what that's all about, and I think it's because we don't, even though we're all excited right now that Trump is going, right? And but the truth is that the system itself needs to be changed and revamped. So even though we might have a change in leadership and hope for the best, we know that the work is there to be done because of all the systemic problems and because the system itself is broken.
Yeah.
So we'll have the new president and a new vice president, and it's all very exciting, but we know that the racism will still be there to deal with, and the militarism and the bloated military budget and the war economy and so on and so forth. So I'm a big believer in forming coalitions. And I think that we've done a lot of that working with Building Bridges of Brookhaven, which is a group that started in 2015 after the racial killing of members of the Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston. And after that, we have members of the local Bethel Church here that called us to everybody in the community to come together, because some of their members were related to some of the people, one or two of the people who were killed in Mother Emanuel Church. And so that began the birth of another group, which is called Building Bridges in Brookhaven.
Right.
And after Trump was elected, it seemed that there was a lot of new groups that were starting, Indivisibles, I can't even think of them all, People Power, a lot of groups that were coming to prominence. And we had the opportunity to work with them, and I remember in the beginning we thought, well, I hope they'll still be around after we get rid of Trump.
Yeah.
Because we were always worried about that, because we kind of really knew that the problem wasn't just Trump; it was sort of a symptom of the problem.
I completely understand that.
Yeah, so we very much support one another's actions and efforts. And it's really great, and I'm always one for forming. If we get an email, like, can we all go up? Resistance Corner is another place, right? Resistance Corner is Route 112 and 347 in Port Jeff Station, and we've done a lot of things there. But like sometimes we'll get an email to form to be part of to have a solidarity rally, let's say. With I'm trying to think, the Women's March for Our Lives. Nobody is above the law. These are just some of the kinds of actions that we join national efforts, and we came forward to host as the local group, and we have wonderful, wonderful rallies there as well. So I just get really excited about that idea.
Go, Myrna, please.
Just one thing that you mentioned before about mentoring. One of the things that's happened to the corner with all of these young people is that they're extremely passionate about their positions. And it has been a little bit of a change.
Yes.
And sometimes when people come, they see a little bit more of an aggressive type of tone that's coming from the young people. And we made the decision that we were not going to stifle this generation. And we had many discussions when we talk about things within our own group, the North Country Peace Group. We had many discussions based on people not being a little bit uncomfortable about it. But we decided that this is their revolution and that they need the megaphone, they need the bullhorn, and we have gladly given it up. And so it's a place for them to come and to feel safe and to express themselves. And we're very happy with the way everything's turned out.
That shows the wisdom and the maturity, though. And I mean that in a real way. I think you have the ability, kind of like the Buddha, to take your hand and touch it to the ground. I think when you're outraged, you don't have that self-control. You're passionate, and that passion's good. I think that shows prudence on your part. Because I think people don't know why they're so upset. They do, but they don't. And they don't know what to do with that. But that's why your focus on action is, to me, so meaningful. Because you can talk so much. But when you take action, it empowers everybody and it bonds you in ways that, just pure discussion doesn't. But it kind of leads me to the next question. And I want to get into this a little bit because I was really impressed with this. Collaboration, and we're kind of touching on that now. North Country Peace Group, you didn't initially endorse a rally against police brutality at your corner, though you eventually did. As you first explained, and I want to say a little bit more before I turn it over, is throughout your long tradition, this is a quote, "We have always given serious consideration to the actions we sponsor or endorse. In this case, we were not provided with the opportunity to offer input or to be part of the decision-making process." And just in my own limited experience, I find that failed attempts at collaboration often come down to groups treating others as set pieces in their action. What have you learned about collaborating with others over the years? Can you cite some examples of successfully collaborating? You just gave one now, but maybe you can dig into some other examples where you said you did endorse it, but you said no, and that you're still very much committed to the same principles, but you were not involved in the decision making. So what have you learned about collaboration, and how have you successfully collaborated?
Well, I think for me personally, it's listening and trying to find out what the mission statement is of everyone who's participating in the particular action. Finding out if there are similarities, how we can work together, and how we can join together to make it the best possible situation. So for me, it's listening to everyone and finding out how we can move ahead and get our position out there.
Excellent.
I know you use the word failed attempts.
It's my own experience, not.
Oh, okay, I got you. Okay, because I couldn't think of any failed attempts on that we've experienced. I know with regard to the rally, we are careful about what we do, and we want to find out as much as we could. And I think because we've been there for so long, I think that we feel a certain responsibility for the people who are there, and also to the community that has come to expect certain things from us and whatever. Mm-hmm. So that's why we want to find out as much as we can about things. And after we talked to one or two of the organizers, well, it was actually just one organizer, we felt comfortable, and as it turns out, many of us, were there in support of it. And as far as other successful collaborations, I wanted to mention that, I'm looking up the date, I don't know if I have it, but a few years ago, some students at Stony Brook University, I think members of the UU Church in Stony Brook, and others, and Black Lives Matter, decided to have a march from the university. And they decided to march to our corner, which was really amazing. So many of us marched with them, and there were quite a few people marching down 25A. And then when they got to our corner, there was a whole rally, and people were getting up to the microphone and speaking. And it was just an amazing, and a lot of planning went into that, because you asked about that. And I know Myrna was part of that planning. So that was just a very, very awesome, rewarding experience. I'm trying to think of others. Fly kites, not drones, at our corner. That was because the Afghan peace volunteers, who are young people, young peacemakers living in Kabul, who I got to know through the years, were asking people, other groups, to stand with them with this idea of fly kites, not drones, because of course the drones are always flying overhead, and so in Afghanistan there's a big tradition of kite flying. And I think you had a picture of it before, if I'm not mistaken, where we're all standing with our kites. And so that was a different kind of collaboration. When the Saudi-led war, the Saudis, sorry, let me turn this off. When the Saudis, sorry, I don't know how come I can't do that. Okay, I'm just going to throw it away. So during this, there's a war in Yemen that's been going on for quite a while, and the Saudis had dropped a bomb on, in this case, it was a bunch of school children, Yemeni school children. And when our friends at Voices for Creative Nonviolence talked to us about that, and we realized that we wanted to do something as well. So they had this display called the Blue Backpacks, and each backpack represented one of the kids that were killed in that bombing. And it turns out that the bomb itself was manufactured by Lockheed Martin, one of the corporate war profiteers that makes a killing on killing. So we decided, yeah, there it is. Yeah, okay, I'm pointing at my computer so you can see that. Yeah. So you see that each one of those blue backpacks. So we did it first in Patchogue. We did first, and then we went to Zeldin's office, but then we kind of got the police called on us and got kind of locked out, because, you don't just go in, you have to pass through all kinds of things. Never has been that way before. But anyway, we asked the question of, why are U.S. bombs killing children in Yemen? And so that was another one that was inspired by Voices for Creative Nonviolence, Kathy Kelly's group. So.
One of the other things that we did also with the backpacks is that we took them up to Renaissance Technologies. But maybe we can talk about Renaissance during this interview at some point because of the Renaissance Technologies has shares in Lockheed Martin. So we really go after the people that are making the weapons of war and doing the killing as well. We've done that at different times. But as Susan mentioned before, at our corner, using that site, we've used that site also at the beginning of the Iraq War, where we had lawn signs with the numbers of U.S. soldiers that had been killed in Iraq and Afghanistan. And we have pictures of probably about 30 or 40 of them. It was an amazing sight, and each one represented 100 soldiers being killed. And at that time, there were about maybe 4,000 soldiers between Iraq and Afghanistan. So we tried to make these a visual of what we're trying to do. It's important for us, especially with something like the backpacks, something like the visuals of the soldiers being, who have died. So we do that type of actions.
I am impressed with how deliberate some of those kind of, like, maybe you could call them theatrical, but they're obviously more than that. But I'm just really impressed with some of the creativity, and I dig into that a little bit more in another question. But I think my point was, which you really eloquently responded to, is I don't want to see all of these groups that have arisen fall. And I think the key is, like Susan, you had said, coalition building. And I think sometimes saying no is okay. It doesn't mean that you don't want to engage with that group. You're just finding that you feel an accountability to your community to represent your values. And if any collaboration I've done that's successful, it's by bringing together representatives from each group and making decisions together every single time. I don't know that there's any other way to do it, and I can see how thoughtful you are in your organizational behavior. You might not describe it that way, and I think that and actions, I think, really, to me, I can understand. I'm understanding better why you're still so successful. The thing I want to touch on next was the most kind of, I guess, for me, it just cuts through a lot of what's going on right now. It's the Trumpalooza and the civil disobedience. And Susan, I was thinking of you when you talked about the length of the tradition of civil disobedience. I used that Gandhi quote, and what Gandhi says is that an unjust law is itself a species of violence. Arrest for its breach is more so. Now, the law of nonviolence says that violence should be resisted not by counter-violence, but by nonviolence. This I do by breaking the law and by peacefully submitting to arrest and imprisonment. So, I want to look at that concept in your own decisions when you had these Trumpaloozas. I feel that local law enforcement, they've tacitly condoned the law breaking of Trump brigades by not enforcing infractions. So we see 2 license plates, they're covered, So we have, this is, these flags, they're obscuring the visibility of these trucks. They're illegal. Blocking license plates is, to me, a little bit more sinister. Describe what happened in Port Jefferson. What conversations took place beforehand? And again, this gets at the heart of civil disobedience, but also how thoughtful you are in your decision making. So what role, if any, did concepts like civil disobedience and action play in the discussions leading up to what took place?
Myrna, are you able to speak about this?
I think, first of all, we did not see the Trumpalooza that went on in Port Jefferson because we were in East Setauket at the time. And so what we did hear about the caravan of probably close to 500 cars and vans and pickups going through our small community was that there was some issues and some issues of people shouting things. There were some people who had heard some racist exchanges, some homophobic rants, and this was actually in the community where I live in Port Jefferson. And so I really can't speak so much about what happened at that point because I didn't see it. This is just based on on hearsay, not hearsay, but what people actually observed. We were in Setauket when it came through. And, it was quite a visual to,
Well, maybe Susan, you can speak a little more freely, but I'm very as interested in the decisions beforehand, the discussions beforehand. And maybe Susan, you could even speak to that as well. That, I think, gets at the heart of the issue for me.
Well, Myrna, having been one of the 3 women who put their bodies in front of the caravan on October 17th and involved in a legal case, cannot really make comment on this, but we were at the courthouse last Friday, a week ago, for the arraignment. I can't say that there was any discussion beforehand about this. And I know up until now we said as a group, we did not have that conversation. I think that this was an act of conscience, a feeling, and I do have Myrna's statement that, and I don't know if this helps at all, but do you want me to read it?
Sure, please.
Okay. When I saw the Trump caravan approaching, knowing it was in support of a president who has fueled so much hate and division in our country, I was moved to resist. It was an act of conscience emanating from my many years as a peace activist over the past almost 18 years as a member of the North Country Peace Group. I had to take a stand against racism and white supremacy, political lies and corruption, voter suppression and authoritarianism, mistreatment of immigrants, and the destruction of not only our democracy, but of our planet. I had to say no more to the insanity that has gripped our nation. As I do every week, I was attending the North Country Peace Group's weekly demonstration for peace and justice at the time of my decision to move into the street to perform this act of civil disobedience in accordance with the principle of nonviolent direct activism that the North Country Peace Group subscribes to. And I personally miss that. I'm there every week, and I was in New Hampshire that day. But I did get calls, and I found out what happened. But I think that this is the long tradition of this, of feeling moved within to take a stand, even when there is risk involved. And I think that Myrna's statement says it all. So there wasn't actually a plan in this case. It really was the on-the-spot movement, I think, the heart, the movement of the heart of people who just felt they had to do something. As far as I can also say that at the time when the women went in front of the car and stopped the caravan, police came on the scene. And the 3 women that were out there totally were nonviolent. They had their fists in the air. They were, for the most part, silent, as far as I can tell in the videos. But there were some of the caravan members who came out of their trucks and so forth and were actually harassing and actually being abusive. And in that case, one of our concerns was that the police were arresting nonviolent protesters, but were not doing anything about some of the behavior of some of the Trump caravan, in which one member of our group got hit by she described it as a club. Others were hit and had signs ripped up. And so there was some of that going on. So, but the real, I don't want to lose the real impetus of this whole thing, which was to actually try to stop something that you could try to stop. Mm-hmm. And I know Bill always talks about Tiananmen Square and the guy that came out and stood in front of the tanks. And I know Myrna doesn't like to hear that because she says, oh, this is nothing compared to that. But it is in the same spirit, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it is.
I feel exactly the same way, Susan. That's interesting. I like, there's an eloquence in the movement of the heart.
Yes.
I understand that. I think, you definitely I want to get to some other questions. And actually, at a certain point, I want to show one of your videos that I thought was really interesting. We'll dig into that in a second. But, I think for me, I do want to address squarely Trump, but it's more of a philosophical direction. So North Country Peace Group, you clearly believe in human dignity, justice, and humanism, not militarism. I draw them as contrasts. You believe all have worth. You decry institutionalized racism and violence and corporate immorality. Has anything surprised you about the rise of Trumpism and Trumpist nihilism on Long Island and in America? Why or why not?
I think nothing has surprised me about Trump. I think it goes back at first to the position he took during the Central Park Five. And that was just one of many, many things that he did at that time. That was so, you just thought that, is this a bad dream? And so nothing ever surprises me about what happened. But to describe him and nihilism, it's that the man has no loyalties. And it was also the rise of morals are not necessary, that there's always skepticism in whatever happens, whatever he does. So this is all indicative of his the past 4 years. I can't say where I've truly been surprised at anything that he's done.
I think more by us, and I'm not being clear, I don't think. It's Trumpism, I mean, as much us, like not us specifically, but America, the way we respond to and accept that and perpetuate it. Is that surprised you?
Yeah, it's hard to believe that there were 70 million people who voted for him. And it's just an incredible situation. I can't understand it, and I don't know where it's going to all end up either.
Yeah, some thoughts, Susan?
Yeah, I think, like I may have mentioned before, but this whole idea of Trump representing something that, and being a symptom of things that have been in existence for quite a long time. And when you have to think back to the founding of the settlement of this country on the backs of the indigenous peoples, and also the whole history of slavery. And, to know that white supremacy and this white nationalism has been at our core for many, many, many years, way before Trump. I think that, I believe personally that Trump sort of legitimized it and even encouraged or fanned the flames of hate and division, but that were there, but maybe not feeling as comfortable to come out of the shadows. And it's been horrifying. And now these people are, proud of this man to the point where they, form these caravans, and it's almost cult-like, and it's scary. Because I still don't believe that we're out of the violence that we could face. I still have a lot of fear about that. I think that the challenge has always been to find common ground. Some people we have counter-protesters across the street and have had for some time, and right now they are mostly Trump supporters. And some of the people from our side of the street have gone over to try to talk, and Bill did that last week when we found out Biden won. The challenge always to find the common ground and find that which makes us human, and so that brings the whole idea of love. And I pulled out something that Jen actually, if you remember, that she pulled together from Martin Luther King's very last book, which was Where Do We Go From Here? And she pulled some excerpts from that. And there's one that I just love. I have it always on my bulletin board, and it says, "So I say to you, I have decided to stick with love. For I know that love is ultimately the only answer to mankind's problems, and I'm going to talk about it everywhere I go. I know it isn't popular to talk about it in some circles today, and I'm not talking about emotional bosh when I talk about love. I'm talking about a strong, demanding love." And I think that's very much where we are now, and that's sort of the choice. And to do the love part is very, very, very challenging. But as I'm talking, I'm remembering the end of Dorothy Day's autobiography, The Long Loneliness, when at the very end, and help me with this, James, but doesn't she say something like, we always have the long loneliness, but in the end, the only thing that helps is community. The only thing that that saves us, right? We're saved by love and community.
I'm not familiar with that, but that resonates with me very much.
Yeah.
When you say that commanding love of MLK, the year of volunteer work I did in Chicago, it was called a mate house. And it's Latin. It's the command of love. Go out and love. It's a command.
Right.
So that speaks to me as well.
Yeah.
At this point, I want to put a clip on, and it'll be familiar to you, and then I'll put up the slide. But I do want to, and we're digging into now Renaissance, and it's interesting because I know you've long been engaged in calling attention to their activities and really who they are in our culture and society. But this is what it says on their page. I find it very interesting. Renaissance Technologies, it's a quantitative investment management company trading in global financial markets, dedicated to producing exceptional returns for its investors by strictly adhering to mathematical and statistical methods. It's, in light of, I knew about them, but not as well as I did as when I was really started to kind of, follow you. So what I'll do is I'll put this video on. It's just the Mercer Puppet Show. So I'll put it on a second. I want to share it.
One of our highlights.
It's great. I love it.
It is. It really is.
I want to make sure. Can you hear the volume okay?
Yes.
Some of my neighbors are here, by the way. I saw them in the video.
That's Bill.
That's puppeteer in chief.
That's Bill. That's
portraying Robert Mercer. And then we have Steve Bannon, and we have
Lee Zeldin.
Lee Zeldin is at the front, and then we have Trump in between, and you can see that they're all linked by these puppet strings.
So 5 million, 9 million,
And Mercer.
2 million.
Mercer is the puppet master.
Yeah, well, actually, yes, correct, right.
This was at our corner for those who have never seen what our corner looks like. This is walking up to Renaissance Technologies.
That's my neighbor with the American flag right there. He lives 5 houses down.
Wow.
Hedge funds, right?
Renaissance Technologies is maybe 150 yards away from our corner, so it's easy walking distance.
It's a good sized group you had there. I really enjoyed that, and I think that kind of and that I kind of get at my question, and I'll pull that up in a second. 1 second. But is what and that video really made it really clear for me. Creative action. Your actions often include a merry prankster component, but his pranksters they buck the establishment, which you do, but you lack that frivolousness. Your messaging is very deliberate and at times very imaginative. So I guess describe the process your group engages in when you plan these kinds of creative actions. Can you describe some unconventional and creative messages you've used and why they're so effective? So I want to really understand the inner workings of the organization and how you put together something like a puppet master with strings, and all that messaging is very, very deliberate and meaningful. So how do you do it? How do you create that?
Well, I can just tell you, though, that for the benefit of those people that are not familiar with Robert Mercer and Renaissance Technology, I can tell you that the members here, there's Chuck, there's Bill, there's so many others who are right on this screen right now, and Susan, Kathy, and I hope I didn't miss anybody. We had our site set up, Renaissance Technology, probably before anybody else did. And this goes back almost a little bit after Cambridge Analytica and Citizens United. And this is a quiet hedge fund for those that don't know too much about it. But we were on their case. We started doing research. We started setting up what we called Camp Mop. This was before the puppet show, well before the puppet show, and it had to do with money out of politics, where we were targeting what was going on at Renaissance Technologies with Mercer and his millions. And it didn't stop there. And the thought that we give to go into those areas just have to do with the money that was going into all of these campaigns and how it was being used, how Steve Bannon was controlling it, how Mercer was involved in it, and how our whole entire system of politics and how candidates are even chosen, and the underhandedness of Cambridge Analytica. So this was a whole situation that we had focused on. And one of the things that we feel to this day, there was a book that was written. It was called, it was by Greg Zuckerman, the man who made the market, I think. And it was about Jim Simons. We're mentioned in that book. And Bill McNulty is mentioned in that book. And one of the interesting, that's right, Jane. And one of the interesting things about Renaissance Technologies and their employees is that they want to stay under the radar.
Yeah.
We were relentless.
Good.
And I can honestly use that word. We were relentless with our actions over a period of 3 years at Renaissance Technologies. We shed the light on what was going on there with demonstrations. We had one of our men sit out in front of their driveway every single day for like 4 or 5 months.
Right.
He would be there with the signs. We would put up signs going into the driveway, going into the main area. So this was something that we knew we had to do. And the good thing was that because of the community support and of our demonstrations, we truly, truly believe that that was one of the reasons that Robert Mercer stepped down as co-CEO at that time. So we had very, very deliberate actions at that time against Renaissance. And we are still targeting Renaissance Technologies because of their investments in shares in Core Civic and the GEO Group. That's the private prison industry. You don't hear too much about it now. And this is a really big situation. So we're trying to get them to scale back. We have signs up, and we've been doing this for about 2 or 3 years, shining the light on their multi-million dollars worth of shares that they have in that company.
That's some dark crap.
Dark money. It's dark money. It's really dark money. If you read about the private prison industry, Renaissance Technologies is right up there.
Have you heard of Reclaim? Are you familiar with that?
Reclaim New York. That was another one of Mercer's. Yeah, but that I think went a little defunct now. But he was very powerful, and he's a very. What I think I can also say, as you're looking at Bill McNulty there, Bill McNulty was invited to Robert Mercer's house for dinner, and that's a story unto itself. And we also had another North Country Peace Group member also who was invited to Robert Mercer's house for dinner. So maybe at some point Bill McNulty can tell us about the dinner with Robert Mercer, because it's quite a.
Were you invited because of your involvement, Bill, in North Country Peace Group?
On mute.
Yeah, I can probably. Sorry, Bill. Give me 1 second. Bill, you're muted.
Oh, okay.
You're good.
I would very much appreciate a moment, not to take away from Susan and Myrna, whose interview this is, but it was part of the planning and the end stage, because we had been petitioning at the guardhouse at Renaissance as part of our actions to have a meeting with Robert Mercer. And when that time came, finally he succumbed after having been turned away many, many times by the guards, who were sympathetic to us, but nonetheless doing their jobs of preventing anybody from getting too close to the office, which is a beautiful building right in the proximity of our corner. But the group, North Country Peace, did send me to that meeting. And I went to his palatial mansion right up here in Head of the Harbor. And it was interesting because I was greeted by, when the door to the place opened, I was greeted by several people, one of whom was a man with a non-disclosure agreement that I had to sign. So I looked at it very, very carefully, and then I said, look, I'll sign this thing, but I have no intention of not telling the people who sent me here what I discovered this night. It didn't seem to be bothering, so I signed it. And I had a very long time with Mercer, 3 hours. I had a wonderful meal. I was very well treated. And there were many things that were exchanged in the course of that evening, having to do with his history, what motivated him. And I can only conclude by saying, just to make this brief, I concluded our meeting by saying, you know, your company is parasitic in nature. It does nothing. I said, it makes money, but it does nothing other than that. And he said, but I create jobs. And I said, well, you create the 15 men or so that work around your grounds, but there are millions of people who are suffering as a result of the policies that you play a role in determining. So I'd say, when I was leaving, I said, look, you probably have a pair of sunglasses somewhere. I have an old jacket I'll be glad to lend you. Why don't I first asked him if he mixed with his neighbors to any great extent, which I knew he did because this place is gated. There are alarms everywhere. So I said, you could put on that costume and come to our corner. And when you do that, you would meet teachers, lawyers, doctors, and average people who live in this community. And you would learn a lot from that experience. And he said to me, I don't think I could do that. But he said, keep me posted. So as Myrna points out, we are keeping him posted, by being present at his place, letting him know that we still think that what his company represents is the vast disparity in wealth that exists between the moneyed class, the ones who set the policies that we meet on the corner each week to resist, to bring light to, the moneyed class that actually controls, pulls the strings, has given us Trump, and is now giving us Biden. But unless we keep up our activities, the same wars will continue, because they are all wars of resource wars that have to do with domination, oppression. And the big problem we face right now is that the war is coming home. And I am afraid to say that the war is not over. I worry about tomorrow, when there will be a big demonstration of these same Trumpsters that came down our highway in front of the White House. And I don't know how far this guy is willing to go, but it worries me very much. And we stand in resistance to that. And looking at all you folks tonight, come to be with us personally. That's the nature of community. Let's have your presence with us, your body with us. And then we can all continue to work as hard as we can to try to turn this train. Thank you for that moment.
Well, let me maybe give you some good news. I serve on a board of education. And last night, 2 weeks ago, we got beat up by the people that think this pandemic is a hoax. And this is the things they're saying. They want their kids in full time. And so we're ready. We're geared up for last night, expecting more of the same. There's no.
I've been on the end of some of those exchanges, so it's interesting. And I see those poor folks who are coming before you in the schools now as having allied themselves with the militia types. They've made a mistake. They've lost the issue.
There was nobody there last night, Bill. Nobody, which shocked us. Like everybody was surprised. But I'll give you, and I want to turn to you in a second, Susan. One thing is about Reclaim. I started a civic where we live, and Reclaim was trying to make inroads here. And I'm friendly with people in our chamber. I'm talking about Sayville. So, they're getting business meetings, and our civic then was starting to work with another civic, and they were having a Reclaim meeting. And I had just stepped down from an office role, and I said, you're hanging out with the alt-right in Sayville? I put it right on the page because I said, we discussed this before I left, and I put this on the page. Because what they do, Reclaim, is they teach you how to complete a FOIL request, a Freedom of Information. They have no interest in obtaining the information. It's under the guise of how there's a lack of transparency. But what they teach you, it's a training, is how to weaponize a Freedom of Information request so that you can file so many that you tie up every municipality in knots so that it can cease to be a referee in the operations of international capital, really. But I think what was funny was in town, the murmur was going around like somebody's got it in for Reclaim. And I was like, I guess it's me. I kind of was like, but enough people have the same values in Sayville that once that was posted, there was an awareness, but nobody really knew who they were. And that's how they're sneaking in there. they're invited to a civic association. This is Mercer International. It's shocking how, like, you guys caught on to them early, and I give you credit. We just got lucky with finding out who Reclaim was. We weren't digging as deeply as you were, and I'm glad I know now. But Susan, I'm sorry, I'm talking more than.
No, that's okay. No, it's all. I know that we even something that just came to mind was what's the name of Arbor Day? Remember Arbor Day?
Yeah.
A few of us walked up to the Owl's Nest where he lives, just north of Stony Brook, and we carried. One of us carried a little sapling, a tree sapling, and so when we got onto the property, of course the cops. Well, you know what, the cops are there and everything. But Chuck, who's on the call, he went up to the microphone because he wanted to communicate, and he said, "Well, we have a sapling for Mr. Mercer," and and I don't even remember the whole conversation, but and there was another time we were there with a bunch of union people that wanted to. Bill and I led the way because they didn't know how to get to the Owl's Nest, and so we always say we should write a book about all this stuff. But the only other thing I wanted to mention when you're talking about creative action is the Dickens Festival, and I almost feel a little bad saying it because the Dickens Festival was really a lovely festival, and I enjoy it in Port Jefferson every year. But it occurred to us back in about 2010, I think it was, that it was an opportunity for us. Because Charles Dickens' writings were many times about social commentary, about the huge gap between the very, very rich and the very poor. And there was the debtors' prisons and all that. So I don't know, a lot of planning went into this. But we came up with this idea that we would go dressed as mostly poor people, like street urchins, chimney sweeps. And so we kind of became part of the act. And we went all through the streets, and we were in character. So so when people would say something, and they thought we were part of the whole thing, but we would have
You were an actual depiction.
we had our Occupy buttons on, and we had and so we had the debtors' prison bars. They were constructed. But then it says debtors' prison, but then it would say a modern day thing, or it may say my job was outsourced, or whatever it was, or stole a piece of bread. And so when people would come and we'd have our old clothes on, I'd say something like, I had to do it because I had no food, and they sent my job over. They made me pay taxes or whatever it was. You just fall into it. And so we started doing that. And the whole idea was to show that there was nothing festive about poverty, nothing festive about crippling student debt, and so forth and so on. And but we did it by playing as part of it. And then we have a video from way back, one of our friends, Captain Phil, actually, who took this. The mayor of Dickenstown was there, and some of us went around, and we actually had a whole conversation with him, and he finally agreed to be part of the picture and the video. And because we were telling him why we were there, and so we actually had a lot of fun. And we in the past couple of years, though, we don't walk around. Bill has I don't know what it's called, the People's Platform. He has his truck and he has an old boat trailer, and so he built it up, and we call it the North Country Peace Group People's Platform. It's all open, and he has speakers on there. So we can literally take that wherever we go. We've taken it to Zeldin's office, and we've taken it all over. But we also take it into the Dickens Parade, and we go around, and so we play all kinds of songs, and we kind of get into the action that way, and then others stand on the corner. So it's become a tradition, though I did hear that it won't happen this year because of COVID. So
with the Dickens Parade, to make sure I'm understanding this, I think I am. It had an established tradition. It's very an imagined view of what it was like back then, but they completely left out the other half. So you became the other half, right? Yeah,
they have street urchins and chimney sweeps, but they also have the wealthy people, and that are signifying the people of wealth,
Right.
But we didn't actually. South Country Peace Group a few years ago started coming up as people of wealthy people, so they had the cigars, and so we would interact with them on our corner where we stand with them on 25A and 112, And so they would be saying, why pay taxes? I never pay taxes. And so we would be saying, yes, but can you spare a dime? And so we'd have this whole play going on, with them. And so I have to say we've had a tremendous amount of fun, and we hand out flyers explaining why we're there and what we're doing. But it's all about the socioeconomic inequities when you have people and it was true then in Dickens' time, and it's true now. So it's not very different.
We haven't had this kind of inequality since the 1890s, I think.
And there are times that people will come up to us and they get what we're trying to say. Yeah. They walk past us and all of a sudden they'll read our signs, they'll look at the bars that we're holding up, and they'll say, oh, now I get it. And but I just want to make a comment of what Susan just mentioned before, because you said in your sheet that you put out, you said, yet North Country Peace Group lacks Kesey's frivolity. Your messaging, in fact, is deliberate and at times imaginative. But what I want to say too also about our mobile unit, it is very, very creative, James. And maybe not as psychedelic as his was when he was driving it across the United States, but we do have a lot of fun in spite of all of the things and the serious components of what we do. You have to lighten up sometimes. You really do.
And
we do that. We do that with the puppet shows. We do that going to Mercer. We do that in Dickens Festival. And it's a community. We're reliving all of these different things. We've also dressed up in orange jumpsuits. Yeah. And we've done that many times when we wanted to, and in hoods. And that can be a very, very shocking visual when people are passing by. That was when the whole idea of closing Guantanamo was going on. And so we do take issues, and we do street theater, which we find and sometimes it's okay to do it.
Oh, I completely appreciate it. And there's you have Trump in prison gear, and obviously, you're making a message, but again, this is part of your backpacks. I think it's effective, extremely effective.
The picture, the Trump person showed up, was it last week? No, it was the week before, I think, with, and you can't tell, but he has quite a long nose, like a Pinocchio nose. And then as the police, ready to take him off to the detention hall. So somebody from outside of our group who's been standing with us showed up, and we didn't even know who it was for a while until she took the mask off.
So one of the things, and this is really kind of, we're going to turn it over to discussion in a second, but this is something I wanted to put out there because I think hopefully it fits kind of some of your philosophy. But one of the things is I wanted to propose an action, and if it's off base, let me know. But we can follow your example by pressing police to drop charges against Myrna and Deborah. I did one letter, but I did some addresses. I'll put it in the chat. And I guess my feeling is that, and this is just my own, as I thought about this, is, we have lawlessness that's accepted. And you were moved by this, by the spirit. But I think when the police are allowing lawlessness and harassment and intimidation and menacing behaviors, you can't. What choice do you have if you're a person of conscience, as you are? It's almost like they're not doing their job. So what I wanted to propose, and like I said, I'll put it in the chat. Just give me 1 second, because I do. I can put a file in here, and it'll take me a second. But so it's in the chat. So if you want to download it, it's accessible, and obviously modify it. And I have addresses in there, and I will pull it up so you can look at it. Just give me 1 second. Sometimes maneuvering this stuff is not as easy as it should be. But here's the letter that's in the chat. So, and again, People can ignore this or use it or not. And this might not represent your feelings on this in any way, but I wrote this in thinking about it, and I'm gonna write this and send it to the people. You're right to file a complaint with your office regarding Suffolk County Police Department's refusal to uphold the duly sworn oath to enforce our laws. I'm referencing the lawless behavior on display at the Trump Caravan, and that was from an article. If I have the wrong event, I think I'm okay. The caravan began at Port Jeff Station. It traveled through Port Jefferson, up into Setauket, and into St. James. We petitioned the county and state to drop charges against caravan protesters, and I mentioned three of you by name. You were arrested for standing in front of a lead vehicle in the caravan. Their actions were a matter of conscience. The Suffolk County Police Department did not enforce New York State and Suffolk laws for traffic and personal conduct. Participants broke the following state and/or county laws. They blocked their license plates. They obscured driver visibility. They violated noise ordinances. They harassed residents. And there's a letter filed with the Port Jefferson mayor, followed by Andrew Rimby. And there's a refusal to honor New York health codes in regards to mask wearing. So, the police refused to discharge the duties they swore to uphold and for which they are compensated with taxpayer money. Your decisions were directly linked to police inaction. You did not enter lightly. In fact, they accept whatever consequences they face. As women committed to peace, how can you sit idly by while others engage in illegal and menacing behavior while the police sit idly by doing nothing? I petition you in the interest of justice, fairness, and for the good of public order to drop these charges. I'm a school administrator, and I'm very concerned about law and order because you're talking about child safety. You do not tolerate escalations of aggression and hostility in my school. Children need to be in a safe environment where they're protected and they're felt whole. So why is it acceptable that we allowed this sort of behavior that we saw in those Trump brigades? So to me, the cops didn't do their job. If you're a person of conscience, like you are, Myrna, and the other two women, you're put in a position where you have to do their job for them. That should not have happened. So I hope that people, if you haven't done it, and I know some of you have appeared in court and are supporting Myrna, and I think that sends an even bigger message. But the addresses I put in there are to the presiding officer of the legislature, the county executive, the governor, and there's addresses also to your particular legislator, right legislators. I know what my legislator is going to do. He's going to throw in the garbage because I know what he's all about. But I'm going to send it to the presiding officer. I'll send it to my legislator. I'm going to send it to the county executive and the governor. Honestly, it was done because I'm sure it was a political decision above the level of an enforcement officer in order to keep public order. They didn't want to escalate and possibly lead to, but they were breaking the law, and that was accepted. So I just wanted to kind of press people on that.
James, just to let you know, you think you wrote October 19th. I believe it was October 17th. Am I right on that, Myrna?
Yes.
October 17th. You may want to just correct
Okay,
that.
so that's good, and that's what I wanted to ask you. But let me pull up that. I want to share that. But this is like for me that I'm going to send those letters off. You can actually email your legislators too. But the question, the way I phrased it, we can follow your example by pressing police to drop charges. What advice do you have for today's activists and for those of tomorrow? Has anything you've seen in us made you nervous or maybe hopeful? I think, to me, like what, I guess really that's kind of the closing point before we open up for some discussion, but what advice do you have for the activists of tomorrow? And are you hopeful?
I feel very hopeful, James. Standing on the corner with these young kids for the past several months makes me extremely optimistic. Not only are they there for Black Lives Matter, but they also have taken positions on climate change, and they're really working very, very hard to do something about that. And I feel optimistic that this is going to be the generation that is going to carry the baton perhaps across the finish line.
Thank you.
Now, I would say that I'm reminded of that there's a revival of the Poor People's Campaign. It's called the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And Reverend Barber, who's one of the founders and the co-chairs, said this is not a sprint, this is a marathon. And it's been a marathon for a long time. what I love about the Poor People's Campaign is it really does connect the dots that we were talking about tonight. So with this idea, and also I wanted to mention Mother Teresa, who said, we are called to be successful, not to be successful, but faithful. So, you don't really see a lot of success, but you see some. But I agree with Myrna with this whole idea of the young people that are coming in. For them, the killing of George Floyd, I think, awakened many people, that's sort of their Vietnam to us who were during that time, and that the hope is in that as we stood on the shoulders of Gandhi and Rosa Parks and Frederick Douglass and Dorothy Day and Martin Luther King and all those others, and hopefully, they will jump on the shoulders of those who are here now, getting kind of old and tired, and take over for us. But so I also find hope in the fact that so many young people have come out, and in all those protests that we saw. It was frightening in some ways because I was so afraid that there was going to be civil war of some sort, because I was worried about these militias and these white supremacy, neo-Nazi things, and very frightening. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of spirit, and the celebration that went on our corner. Oh my gosh! And we have a guy that comes and plays music for us, and we were dancing and singing and carrying on, and it was it was wonderful. And so there's a lot of hope in that.
And for those of you also, we have a Facebook page. It's called the North Country Peace Group Facebook page, and you can go on that site and see some of the things that we've been doing, and see some of the videos that were taken last Saturday with the music and everybody jumping up and down, and really a good celebration.
And a good interview with Bill McNulty, who decided to go across the street that day and talk to the Trump supporters.
Yeah.
Now you're on mute, James.
I unmuted it for everybody.
Okay.
There's a few people that, I'm friendly with, including my mom who's down there, Therese, Beth. But so most of the people know you, but if anything came up, that even if, Myrna and Susan, any questions, any thoughts, I think that, got you thinking during this time that we're talking.
I'd like to share regarding your question of mentoring. You asked it, and it's a difficult question to answer easily. You asked to what extent there was mentoring going on with those of us who have for many years been to the corner. And the idea with mentoring, as I understand it, is you share what you think is good advice, and advice relevant to the person who you're talking with. It tends to have an advocacy. And I think that what I'd like to say about that is we do mentor. We mentor to each other, and I think that's most importantly. We try to help all the members and all the people who come to the corner to realize that there is truth in what you may be thinking on your own. And to me, that's a very powerful part of mentoring, to validate what people are wondering about and wondering what their role is in it. The second thing about mentoring is it has to do with hopefully providing objective as possible information. And I think our mission, if you look at what we've decided we want to be behind and why we don't necessarily, this is the first election cycle we have supported the candidate, is we do support the facts that lead to peace and justice. The principles behind those facts, are, of course, we have been mentored over the years from the great peacemakers of the world. So this is a continuum. And if it's not always mentoring, it definitely is the ability of all of us to understand it matters what we do in terms of talking about what it is we think is true. And most importantly, it matters what we don't do or are seen to do. And the last thing is it takes courage. And it's my pleasure to acknowledge, once again, the courage that those of us who come to the corner, particularly those who were willing under the COVID pandemic to be in rather close contact with a lot of people, that this is not only a theoretical issue of mentoring, it actually is an issue of total commitment and the ability to step into danger. And my hats are off to the ladies as much as the men, to say the least. And Jim, I really appreciate you giving us an opportunity to establish a communication line to more and more people to know what's going on and what every person has a choice to make.
Thank you.
Can I just clarify that we do have like two corners, really. The main corner is the one right in front of CVS. Then the one next to it is in front of the bank. We call that the socially distanced. Everybody has masks on, both sides. But the socially distancing, more adhered to on the other corner where people do want to be a distance away. But we do insist, everybody, even the young people, are very good about wearing masks, and just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. Feel free. Other people, any thoughts?
Beth, what were you thinking of?
Oh, Beth, you were going to say.
Yeah.
Oh, me, sorry. Having been boots on the ground for many, many years doing these kinds of things, it has struck me that as my hair got white, everybody else's hair was white also. And I went to an anti-gun rally, I think 2 years ago. I was probably the youngest in the group, and there had to have been 50 of us there. I am so glad to hear you saying that there are young people involved. I don't do protests anymore because I'm too old and there's too much virus around. But I do have a lot of contact with people who go, and sometimes I just go and sit in my car and watch. The young people are filling me with joy, and also relieving a lot of the burden. I say to myself on a regular basis, after us, then who? I'm a retired high school teacher, science, but I used my bully pulpit to, in any way I could, manipulate their minds to social justice, which you can tie into science very easily. And hopefully some of them are out there now carrying signs, but thank you for that. For drawing in young people. It's probably the most important job that we have, or this will be over soon. So thanks a lot.
You didn't even draw them in, they just showed up. I can't even take credit for drawing them in.
I have to
They just started showing up and showing up and showing up. I think it's because we were an established, every Saturday at a certain time we're there, you know.
I've told this to Susan, Bill, and others that I would not have changed these past 8 months for anything. We have become extremely close with these young kids. They call us, they ask us questions, they want to know what we did. When one of them called me last week and we were talking, and he said to me, he goes, when we first came and met you all, he said, we thought you were all so old. I said, right. And I said, we are, and we welcome you. And, it's okay. But Beth, you're absolutely right. Having them on the corner has really, it's been an education for everyone.
Changes everything. Just change.
It does. It really does.
Thank you for all your hard work.
I think it's just really, even though it seems like forever for you, I'm sure. I was a member I'm James's mother. I was a member of the Catholic Peace Fellowship and Pax Christi, and a long history of witnessed. And I'm just so excited at these interviews that James is doing. But given what's happening now, and we know it's just beginning, it's not over, right? I think that this venue and your witness, the fact that you have witness, is essential, because I think you're providing a place where people can hear and come, and it's just beginning. And it's a really, really important dimension of social life that you're doing this. I have friends in Germany. They live in a small town. And every Saturday, people from churches and people who don't believe anything, they come together and they have a big banner that says, "We pray for peace in the world." And they stay there for 20 minutes and the church bell rings and then they all go home. And they've done that for years. But there's something about not giving up and being a presence that you're called to do that. And I think maybe you were called for this very moment. Because we must help and direct people. Because I think we have a big fight on our hands. I don't think this is going to be easy.
Oh. Hey, Therese, you must know Bill Brazotti and Kathy Boylan and others that were part of that peace program. And you know,
I do. We used to go to Wyandan.
Yeah. The Casa de la Paz and all the rest.
I know your name too. I know your name, Bill. I don't know you, but I know your name too. Bill Brazotti is a living saint, I think.
I know, recently retired now, sort of living in comfort, still playing his banjo. But you know, it was the connections that you make that sort of give us the motivation. In the course of those days, you know, I've met and been able to pass on to the folks experiences with Dan Berrigan and Phil Berrigan and some of the Plowshares activists, some of whom were just sentenced today and another will be sentenced, I guess was today or yesterday, and willing to spend a long time in prison in order to bring forth these ideas. So in a sense, we bring them to our community and we then make our efforts. And they may not equal in intensity or even in danger, although Marina certainly incurred danger in what she did, but they are an imitation of those people. And I just would like to point out, when you get out and mix, that's why I would say to all of you here tonight to come together personally and physically. Because when you meet up with these people, there's so much of an inspiration that comes to you. And I'm reminded of a fellow by the name of Charlie Litke, who was a Vietnam veteran. He was a priest, rescued many men off the battlefield during some firefight, and then went on to give up his priesthood, to leave the priesthood and to become an activist. And he received the Congressional Medal of Honor from President Johnson. And then, as he worked through the peace movement, and I met him during this time, had activity with him, he went to the Vietnam Wall, and he was the only person in the history of this country to take off his Congressional Medal of Honor and to create a shrine at the foot of that wall and lay that medal down and give it back in the name of ending the wars. And that's basically one of the main motivations of our corner, is this doctrine of perpetual war. And when we study, deliberate, meditate, contemplate, all the rest of the study that we do, and then action, as Jim was saying, action does come, we recognize that war is the mechanism by which we maintain these arrangements, these socioeconomic orders that keep people in oppressed states. We recognize. And Phil Berrigan on a number of occasions reminded us that the court is the muscle of the militaristic state. And when you encounter the court, you're encountering people who are sworn to, and probably in good faith, they simply reinforce the structures that are in place, whether they be racist, homophobic, sexist, anti-immigrant, anti-gay, all the anti-stuff. And we stand in resistance to those people who are trying to come forth and live their lives fully and completely in a safe, peaceful environment. And that's what always makes me so happy to be with people and to recognize that even a guy like Mercer, he's got a chance and we're giving it. So it's good to be with you all. Thank you, James. And thank you, Susie. And thank you, Marie.
Keep going. I hope that you can have this type of gathering, and maybe James could facilitate it or something, because I think it would. I mean, I'm sorry that I missed the program. I had a chiropractor appointment. You know, what does it mean to stand on the corner, and how do you call people to do that with you, and to really promote it? I mean, I think James is doing this solo, you know, like on his Facebook page, and a few of us try to copy it, everybody. But I think that, I really think it's essential what you're doing, and I think we need help. I think what Bill said is true, that if I didn't go to Washington, I wanted to do something for peace. I never was, very distressed about war and stuff. But if I didn't go to Wyandanch and if I didn't meet Bill Prasadi and people who were active, I wouldn't know how to think about things. I wouldn't be able to grow. I mean, I made a retreat with Bishop Gumbleton in the city many years ago. But just, like they have the fever. And so you have the fever, Myrna and Susan. You wouldn't be happy doing anything else because you're called to do what you do.
Mm.
I know that.
That's it. I agree with you. Breaking up.
I worked with people with AIDS for many years. People used to say to me when I worked with people with AIDS, oh, you must be a very good person, or you must really be sensitive. And I thought, they have no idea what they're saying. I was gaining so much from being with people with AIDS. I was growing, I was validated. It was easier to be with them than it was to be with anybody else. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know how to tell them that. But I think when you're involved in peace work, which is hard and it takes courage and it takes patience, you can't be anywhere else because that's what you're supposed to be doing. And you're not doing it for yourself. And you're not really even doing it to protest. You're doing it for other people so you can build a body of people that begin to think in a certain way. I loved Obama, but I couldn't stand drones.
I lost my. Can you?
I lost her.
I think one of the things, I don't know.
I loved, I did not like war.
Mom, you're cutting out a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I don't need to say anymore. I'm good.
I think, Bill, you had said something that it takes courage. I think for people like Myrna, I mean, when you enact a matter of conscience, what that means is you can't not do it. Like, in other words, if you're moved, I think, it's not courage. You can't live with yourself if you don't. Mm. I think that's what it comes down to.
The moment does come.
Yeah.
You never know when or where or why. A lot of stuff builds up within you, and then something triggers your action at a particular time. You agree to join with others, you move with them, and then you take the consequences. You don't deny what you did. You explain why you did what you did. You remain faithful to the principles that moved you to that point, and then you call upon the judge in your case, Your Honor. Come down from that bench, leave behind what you're sitting on, and join us, because this is America. This is America. Come down with us. And we've done that on a number of occasions. They haven't done it, but you let them know. And they go home and they think. They go home and they think, and who knows what will come of that. If enough people think.
The listening. I don't know, Susan, if you said that or Myrna, but one of the two of you said that. I think that's the key. Because I think as we feel passion, and we're lost in the inhumanity that we see. But when you're able to listen is when you're able to form community. And that's when you're really strong. And whether it's a coalition or a community that you're part of, which is a coalition of people. But the listening is when you're able to really effectively bond. And that's when you have the support system to sustain, Other thoughts, Beth?
Quick. I met your mom almost 35 years ago, volunteering at an AIDS services agency in Huntington. And Teresa's the kind of person where we didn't have dinner and we didn't call each other, but we meet from time to time on the street, and it is meeting an old friend and meeting an old part of you. To be working in AIDS services 35 years ago was really crazy. People would say the most awful things. How could you? And we did. And we connected, and some of the most important people in my life, who I know are in your life too, are still part of our lives. But that's really what it's about. There is a human connection, and you either have it or you don't. And regardless of what your work is, you take these people and you progress and you move forward, and it grows and it grows, and it's glorious. Couldn't be any other way. And again, thank you for tremendous amount of work and leadership.
Other thoughts? Anybody maybe that hasn't contributed or spoken that is thinking anything? You know, one thing you said about young people. I've been blown away in Sayville, and I gave so much credit to their teachers and their families and the community and culture. I think that exists in our schools, but in our community. But you know, when our RGB died, kids organized an event. There was 200 people, 250 people, I think. But I think what blew me away, which I don't think I've ever been more proud of my town, was after George Floyd, 2 19-year-olds said, we're doing a Black Lives Matter event in Sayville. And, you know, they didn't know anything. You know, and they ended up planning good service. Like I tried to connect them with activists who've been involved, just so they had support, people that were more experienced than I was, make sure that they were safe, that it was purposeful, that they, you know, really represented how they felt. But what I'll do is Sayville is an extremely homogeneous community. But I want to put a clip on because the biggest event I've ever seen in my town was this Black Lives Matter. And this is just a small clip. And hopefully it pulls up.
We're hearing it, Jim.
We heard it, but couldn't see it.
All right, let me see if, you can't see it?
No.
It says sharing computer sound. It doesn't say sharing screen. You have to share the screen.
Give me 1 second.
Yeah, it was very loud, and we could read that.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Hopefully you can hear it. All right.
There you go.
Wow.
With 3,000 people there.
Wow.
Nice.
That was me driving by and honking.
Well, it's something to think 2 young girls started all that.
We've never had 3,000 people on that land for anything, including our summer fest, which is a big summer festival. It's the biggest assembly of people I've ever seen in our community, and they were 2 19-year-old kids.
Good for them.
Well, but I think it was for them, they were moved that way, like you were talking about that. They couldn't do nothing. They had to take action. I think if we're going to continue to work towards democracy, it's by listening, by being in community, and by taking action. I think, that energy, it creates energy that sustains us. But doing it since 2002 at One Corner. So I appreciate the mentorship you provided really to everybody.
You're very good.
And to your group, you're extraordinary. And I just am grateful that you spent this time, and I appreciate all the members that are here, because this is really your group that's on the call, which is great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for asking us to be a part of this series. We really, really appreciate it. And just taking the time, setting this all up. Greatly appreciate it.
You're welcome.
It's a great thing you're doing.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, this is Jen. This is Brady. She's on there. I haven't heard her talk.
No.
And come up on a Saturday morning. We'd love to have you.
Yeah, I'd love to do that.
It's quite an experience to stand with us. 11 o'clock every Saturday morning.
Maybe it'll be the day that Marcia comes to join us. He'll be the guy with the dark glasses on and the old jacket.
Yeah, but it used to be 11 to 12, then it became 11 to 12:15, 11 to 12:30, and now I have to say there's the kids hang on there till some 1:30, sometimes later, and we do have a police presence now, but it's actually been a good thing because we have the barricades up and so forth. But and it was a few weeks ago when Myrna and I think were the last ones to leave besides the young people, and I think it was like 1:30 or something. And then like a little bit later, I'm driving by trying to go do an errand, and I see Myrna and two of the young people and this lady yelling at them. And this must have been 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Now these kids were still there, and this woman can't come across saying, you assaulted my daughter, which was all craziness. Nothing of the sort had happened. But one girl had called Myrna, like, you better come down. And I happened to be passing. So before we know it, we were involved in this whole thing. We had to call police and everything. But that's part of the community, I think, is that, these young people, but they're so dedicated. They'll stay till 4, they stay all day.
That's awesome.
We have to go home because we're too tired.
I'll tell you. I will tell you one funny story though, James, that the day I was arrested, I can't speak about this. This was that I was wearing, I don't know if it was Chuck's or Bill's Kaepernick jersey, and which we have used for pictures in the past. And so here I am wearing this bright red football jersey, and I didn't have any ID on me. And so when the police took me in the car, they didn't know what to call me. So they kept calling me, saying, Kaepernick, get over here. Kaepernick, get in the car. I had my face mask on. So we get to the 6th precinct. All right, Kaepernick, it's your turn. Get out. Kaepernick, get up to the window. Kaepernick, sit down. Kaepernick, but here's your hand, whatever. But those are the things, those are the good things that you remember. And you have to remember them because it's all part of the whole process.
And then can you say what happened when they asked you if you're part of a gang?
Oh, I just don't say that.
You can't say it?
You can't say it. Oh my God.
Can I say it?
No,
No, I can't. All right.
Another time. It's funny, you're telling us, Sister Karen Burke. Are you familiar with her?
Oh, yeah.
yes.
She told a funny story where, there was an accident. She got arrested, and I think it was the group of them, and they were with, I don't know if they were with both the Berrigans and maybe, I don't know, like Charlie Sheen, someone like
Charlie Sheen.
Oh, Martin Sheen.
Martin Sheen.
So they get arrested. They're in jail, and Martin Sheen's with them, and then they finish, and Martin Sheen goes, "Well, you guys all hungry?" And they're like, everyone's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I'll take you out to lunch." And I think Daniel Berrigan might have looked at Karen and said, "Karen, it's not usually this good."
Those are good stories.
All right, well, thank you again, everybody. And Susan and Myrna, I'll send you the recording. There's like a little access code, and this way you have it.
Great.
Yeah, and I post it around too. And this, it's just for something, it's good to have. I'm sure you have. You started out, Myrna, talking about all of the posters you have, which is awesome. But this, hopefully that you hold on to it, and your kids, your grandkids look at it. It's nice, So, but I really just appreciate your time and both of you sharing your wisdom, and Bill, your wisdom, I appreciate very much.
Well, I just want to say one thing about these young folks that are coming. One thing we fear about them is that periodically they say, "Okay, let's kneel down while we sing the national anthem." And I'm afraid to do it because I'll never get up.
Thank you to my family who is on this Zoom call. I love you.
Well,
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, James.
Thank you, Myrna. Thank you,
Thank you
Susan.
very much, James. The great work you're doing.
Thank you, everybody. And
Goodbye to you all. Hope to see you in person as time goes by.
I will get there. I will.
Beautiful.
Good.
Bring some kids with you.
All right.
Good luck. You're fierce.
I'll bring my daughter.
Good. Wonderful.
All right. Well, thank you again, everybody. Have a good night, and good luck tomorrow morning. And I will see you again for sure.
Okay.
Beautiful.
All right,
Thank you, James.
Thank you.
Good night.
And Therese, thank you.
Hi, everybody.
Bye.
Good job, Mama.
Thank you very much. I
I love that.
appreciate that. Yeah. He's my youngest. He's the only boy.
All right. I'm going to end it.